This sculpture, the Bronco Buster, was donated by a private citizen who wanted visitors to always be reminded of Denver's Western traditions. In the background is the gold-domed State Capitol building.
What is up, everybody? Welcome into the DNBA live show presented by Illegal Pete's. It's getting worse and worse.
Do it again.
It's getting worse every single time. I'm your host, Adam Matez. I am joined, of course, as always, by Eric D-Line-Co.
Yeah, look how red I look.
You look really red.
Angry. What's going on with me, do you think?
You do. And Vote looks a little blue, so I got a little like devil and angel thing going on.
Yeah.
In Harrison's ear. Harrison, what's happening?
Which one of us is an angel?
That Bronco statue is why Jerry Judy and KJ Hamler think we live in the. You can either live in a cabin or.
How funny was that
or an
clip?
apartment.
We got to talk about that when we bring our guest on. That's like a good conversation starter, actually, so I want to talk about it. I didn't plan on it. And then, of course, Brendan Vogt.
What's cracking, fellas? Hold on. Sorry, Adam. I'm sending tweets live while we do this, so give me a second.
Tweet it.
The most important thing, as always. Guys, today our guest is one of my favorite people on earth to talk to. I called him the most fascinating, or the most interesting man in the world, international man of intrigue.
Whoa.
And of course, yeah,
It's a strong sell. Yeah.
This is a really strong sell, but it's actually all true in this case. Dr. Travis Heath. Doctor, thanks for coming on.
I can't live up to that. So thanks a lot, Adam. It's all downhill from there now.
I like that you didn't put doctor in your own title, but Adam sees fit to refer to you as doctor every time.
True. I would make everybody call me doctor.
Me too. Like, why isn't it in your name? Travis got to pick his own name. He just put Travis Heath with the F.
I'm just a dude, man. Just a dude.
My doctorate it wouldn't even have to be a real. They could just be an honorary doctorate or something.
Yeah.
Be like, excuse me, it's actually doctor. Travis, it's good to see you, man. How are you? My first question, of course, is how are you and your family? Sort of surviving this the times that we are in.
We're doing as well as we can, man. I mean, I feel pretty fortunate. It's not my preference to teach all my classes online at the university, but I am. And so, in some ways, I'm fortunate to be able to do that. And my practice is still going and all that. Now, I'll tell you, doing emergency remote learning with an 8-year-old and a 3-year-old is not ideal. But
right.
If that's the worst complaint I have, then we're doing all right, man.
Are you parenting in shifts? Because there are times when me and my wife both will have a conference call, and it's like, all right, the kids, let's just hope. Let's just cross our fingers.
Yeah, we've done that multiple times. We did it earlier today. Yeah, just basically, thank God for screens. Like, I don't know what our parents would have done. You just throw them on iPads now, and they're fine. But, we would have killed each other in the living room or something 30 minutes later. So screens are a lifesaver, baby.
My kids are at an age where they're particularly destructive because they're smart enough to get into things that are very expensive. So
is that what it is? That they just know that it's expensive now? They have the wherewithal to know that it'll hurt daddy if they break it?
The opposite. They have no idea how expensive it is. So they'll be like, look what I took apart, Daddy. Like, oh, my computer. Sweet.
Yeah, sick.
sick move. So it's wild. But Travis, we're going to get into it. We have some really cool topics today. If you want to join the chat, you're going to want to hop into the DNVR lounge. Later on, we're going to have people on. If you have questions for myself or anybody on this panel, you can hop on and join the chat with us. Later on, we're going to play the steps. But we're going to continue our conversation about The Last Dance and really about some of the topics that have been most interesting about it. So first of all, I asked you this before, so I know. You've been watching this. Were you excited? Are you a Michael Jordan guy?
That's an interesting question. I mean, look, I'm 40 years old. When you grow up in the era I grew up in, like, everyone's a Michael Jordan guy to an extent. Like, I'm a big Nuggets guy. I've always been a big Nuggets guy. And
exactly.
So, while it was happening, no, I didn't like Jordan. I always rooted for Jordan to lose. But I always like privately adored like his greatness. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so I didn't want to put that out for public consumption when I was growing up, but I'd be in the backyard or the park like everyone else, working on the fadeaway, right? Doing the shot over Craig Elo, right? Moving right to left and shooting the jumper, and then doing the fist pump. So, yes, he was a huge. How could he not be? But I didn't want to advertise that. A part of me didn't like him.
Okay, so you were the guy that wanted to root against him, because I think that is an interesting guy. For Michael, it just seemed like there were so few of those.
Yeah,
it's not so much that I wanted to root against him. It's just. Listen, I just wish he was on the Nuggets. Like I wish, I was jealous more so than just like wanting to root against him, I guess.
Yeah.
I can't picture Michael Jordan on the Nuggets. I can't picture LeBron. I can't picture any of that type of player on the Nuggets.
Like for Nuggets fans, like the best Michael Jordan memory is when his undefeated Bulls rolled into McNichols and the Nuggets beat them. Like that was like, yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering, like, are they going to include that in the doc? And then I was like, no. No.
It must be in the deleted
It's like a 5-second snippet in the doc.
They might. What if there was like a great story to that loss and that's never been told? And we're like, oh, all right, yeah.
Literally nobody would care about that except the 5 people on this call.
Yeah, that's probably true. That's probably
It'd
true.
be awesome, though.
Yeah. Who were your guys like in that era outside of Nuggets? Was there anybody you were like, were you pulling for Chuck? Were you like pulling for some of these guys to get, or not really?
Nah, I wasn't a Barkley guy. I liked Magic Johnson. That was obviously his era overlapped with Jordan's, but I was a big Magic Johnson fan, despite not particularly liking the Lakers. But I've always been a sucker for.
Yeah, we're homies, man.
Yeah, I've always been a sucker for dudes who can pass the basketball. This is why I love Jokic so much, man. So,
yeah.
I mean, I had all my Nuggets guys, but I was a Magic Johnson guy. And then, it was what was it, 91, I think it was. That was a great finals between the Lakers and I was rooting more for Magic than I was like the Lakers. Yeah. So it's a strange thing. I sort of in some ways felt that way with Kobe over time too, right? Like my heart's a Nuggets fan, but yet, I always appreciated Kobe's game. But Kobe really wasn't like, that's not my type, I like guys who can pass the basketball. So I really loved Magic, and it's too bad his career. I mean, I know he came back, but like the prime of his career in a lot of ways was cut short. I would have loved to see more battles between him and Jordan.
How old was he in '92? Because he wasn't that old. He was only 33. I mean,
I think he still had good years left. And plus, the thing about Magic was he didn't rely on athleticism. He never relied on athleticism, right? He's one of those below the rim guys who would post you up, and I think he could have played effectively for some time.
Yeah. What has stood out to you so far through 5 episodes of The Last Dance? Like, is there anything that really interests you?
Gosh, there's a lot. I mean, this may not be a popular take, but I wish Jerry Krause was around to give his side of the story. Not because I'm a Jerry
popular
Krause.
In this chat.
Oh, good. Not that I'm a popular. Not that I love Jerry Krause, but there are always multiple sides to stories, right? And I feel like this documentary, and I've seen some media attention around this, has been really anti-Jerry Krause. And it's like, anytime a story turns that far anti someone, you're like, no parts are being left out. So I've been intrigued by that. I love the Rodman episode. Like, I thought that was great. It's just, he's such an interest, like as a psychologist, I like interesting people, and he's an interesting person. And I've never met Rodman. I mean, I've been fortunate to meet a lot of different guys associated with the NBA, never Rodman. I'd love to meet him. And then the last thing I'd say is it's been interesting getting to learn more about Scottie Pippen. Like, I didn't know, I thought I knew a decent amount about him, but I learned a lot more about his upbringing and kind of what makes him tick. And I found that to be really interesting too.
Yeah, I find him interesting. I also find this comment interesting I see coming in here. Crazy to see the professor's paper I'm working on my favorite Nuggets podcast. This is one of those 2020 so weird.
Yeah, things just got awkward. Yeah.
Can't you give him one of the answers? Like, give him one answer here.
Tell him to get back to work.
That particular person, if they actually are a student of mine, they will tell you there's not a right answer. See, that's why I drive students crazy, because they go, "What's the right answer?" I say, "There's not one. It's whatever answer you construct," and then I grade how you go about constructing your answer.
Oh,
you're not going to be much help on the steps. I can tell already.
Could be anything, really.
What do you feel like it is?
Oh man, I had a perfect drop for it. Let me see if I can get it.
Turns out I was wrong.
I gotta hand off these duties to somebody else. One of the things that's really, really interested me about this last episode, and I know you hadn't seen episode 6, so I'm throwing something at you maybe that you're a little ill prepared for, but they talk about, and actually did a really good job, I thought, of addressing and forcing Michael to speak on this, his comment, Republicans buy shoes too, and his sort of unwillingness to be a sort of spokesperson for any type of social issues. And you know, I always wondered if he was really put into a corner and said, hey, answer for this, what your answer would be. Would it be like, oh, well, I didn't know, or this or that? And his answer was, I didn't want to. I just didn't want to be a guy that had to go out there. And I'm curious, there's been a lot of conversation on this, and athletes, I think nowadays, more so maybe even than that era, not the social rights era, but we're talking about the 90s, maybe even more so than then, athletes are just sort of expected to comment on everything. In your opinion, to what extent are famous people, your LeBrons, your Kobes, your Michael Jordans, these types of people, to what extent are they responsible, in your opinion, to sort of take stands publicly?
Mm-hmm. Responsible is an interesting word. Like, I don't think they're obligated.
Yeah.
I mean, and obligation is an interesting word to me because, like, we have contractual obligations, we have moral obligations, and of course, morality is kind of like, usually we say you have good morality if you agree with me, right? And so, but what kind of obligation do we mean? Responsible, though, that's an interesting word. I mean, no, not in a general sense. I don't think they're responsible for that unless it was in their contract. Now, in terms of what they have to live with, that I think is the more interesting question. Yep. And that's where you start getting into the personalities of people involved. Like in the work that I do, I've worked with pro athletes over the years. And if a pro athlete came to me and brought that question up, probably what I'd say is like, all right, imagine that you're on your deathbed. Well, that's a privilege to be on a deathbed. I mean, you could get hit by a bus or whatever, sure, right? But let's say you are, and you're reflecting back on your life, and you can see people starting to write your obituary. Like, how is it that you wish them to reflect on you and what you would have done? Like, that's the route I would go, and having people reflect. Now, I don't necessarily think it's good or bad. So it's not, they don't have an obligation, but they have a right to. See, sure. That's where I think it's important to distinguish. Right. So when people say like, well, Kaepernick shouldn't be like, no, he has the right to do that. He's a human being in society and he has a right to, but he doesn't have an obligation to. So that's sort of where I weigh in. And then it's like with each person, you know, how are they going to reconcile whatever their behavior was? And if Jordan is okay with it, that's fine. I don't think he has an obligation to speak up.
Being okay with it is key. Beeson25 framed it pretty, I think, properly in this comment. Why can't athletes or celebrities just be who they are? Why do they have to stand for anything? Well, you can be who you are, but I also think in life, in your day-to-day interactions, you might find it harder to spend time with or admire someone who does not stand for anything. And so your athlete doesn't have to, but they also then have to be okay with the consequences, some of that being losing some social currency and just, I don't know, maybe people losing respect for you. That's on the table.
Yeah, I mean, there's something to be really looked into, though, with what Jordan said, that Republicans buy sneakers too, meaning that it wasn't worth it for him to lose the respect of people for things that he was not made famous for. Like, he's not famous because he's a great orator and he has amazing social points, and he's famous for being a basketball player, and people look up to them for that, and that's okay. Like, there's just like there's something about like setting an example in the way that you act, which is funny because in the way that we sort of tore him down last time for the gambling, that could be seen as maybe not a great way to set forth an image. But I mean, for him, it's like really like he had this really cloistered idea of who he was. He didn't really let it out. It was like sort of he had this idealized form where people just looked to him like a hero, like a god. Yeah, right. Yeah. And for him to say one thing or another, he would lose half of his audience. Sure. Right. Yeah. So, I can really understand that. that's not why he felt like he was here. He felt like he was here to be an example in the way that he acted.
Yeah, he never wanted that responsibility. Like, he never thought when he was growing up in North Carolina that he was going to be on this stage and this icon and be asked about these opinions. He just kind of wanted to make a living hooping. And I feel like that's honestly the case for a lot of players today. Like, they just kind of want to go out and hoop and mind their own business and make their money. And, I mean, it's a case-by-case basis, but in my opinion, it's kind of hard to fault them for that.
I think a lot of athletes want to have the platform when it's self-serving. Like, and what I mean by that is they don't want to talk about politics, but they want to talk about art and culture and this or that, where it's like, okay, well, you're not really qualified to talk about that one either, but you do have this platform and people are just genuinely curious about everything about your life. So it does, to me, it is a little bit of a double-edged sword this way. And it's interesting to me because you remember this, Travis. Charles Barkley famously said, I'm not a role model. Like, the parents are role models. It shouldn't be me. And 30 years ago when he said that, everybody thought he was so out of line for it. Like, oh my gosh, this guy doesn't want the responsibility. So it's funny to me that we've recontextualized this. I happen to agree. I think it's also accurate that we shouldn't expect these guys to be experts and talk about every opinion. But it's funny how in 30 years that's really flipped.
Well, if you remember, though, what's interesting is I believe Nike turned that into some kind of advertising campaign. Like, I am not a role model. And so, like, the business of this is can't be escaped, right?
Yeah.
Like, so, Republicans buy shoes too. Okay, but like Kaepernick, I know he's not an NBA player, but he's just the most famous recent example of this, okay? And that dude's lost a lot of money. I mean, and he was at least an average NFL quarterback. And if you're an average NFL quarterback, you play for a decade because there's such a dearth of like even average quarterbacks, right? He wasn't great, but he wasn't awful. He's average. And he's lost his career because of that. But remember, Nike turned it into an advertising campaign. Yeah. And so, like, the quote-unquote rebel, there is a way to market that. But I think one of the main reasons that athletes shy away is their own financial bottom line, right? And look, there's a lot of this. It's not just athletes. I mean, perhaps the dollar figures are larger for athletes, but where, companies say, well, you can't speak out on politics, I wouldn't last 10 seconds in a company like that. But I can understand the position of that, but I don't see. Let me just say one more thing about this. One thing I think the NBA has generally done better, measuring my words here, but I really think they've done it better as I think about it than any other professional sports league, is allow their players to be people, right? Like in the NFL, Terrell Owens, pulls a Sharpie out of his sock and signs a football. I mean, the NFL sort of has Teflon on anyways in terms of ratings, at least historically. But, like, why wouldn't you want that? That's fantastic. Right. And you don't really get to know NFL players anyways. And so one thing, I saw this clip of Dennis Rodman when he played for the Spurs, like 2 minutes. He's just dropping F-bombs. He's obliterating Rod Thorne and David Stern. And, he got suspended for a couple games. But, like, I think the NBA understands that. Like, listen, we are basketball purists here. We love basketball. We get into the analytics and all that. But for the average person, the NBA is reality television, man. Yeah. And so, like, when we start thinking about activism and that sort of thing, if I were running a sports league, I'd embrace that. I'd embrace the controversy, because the last thing you need are flat characters. You need three-dimensional characters, right? It's like WWE or something. It doesn't have to get that crazy, but you have to have three-dimensional characters or it's not interesting. And the NBA, to me, has been really good at that. And that's why I think, generally speaking, it's been the most interesting. And so when you get more athletes that speak their mind, is it a risk to your bottom line? Yes, unless the culture that you're a part of starts to welcome more of that. And I do think, like, you remember when the commissioner said they could wear the shirts, was it the Can't Breathe shirts?
Yeah.
It was a couple of years ago, right? And it was like, hey, y'all can wear these for one pregame, right? And everyone around the league or whatever did. Like, if you make it acceptable that people can be people, then I think there's less risk. But, like, if you do this in the NFL, well, I mean, you're SOL, man.
Do you think the NBA has gone too far with this, though? And what I mean by that is the NBA seems very preoccupied with what players are wearing. And I'm talking about the fan base, not just the NBA itself, but how it's sort of evolved. Everybody seems maybe even extra interested in what players are doing and thinking and this and that, and almost maybe less interested in what they're playing like what they're doing on the actual court.
No, I think you're right. And that's why the offseason, I think, is more interesting to most fans than the games on the court, which I like the offseason, but like, the Nuggets playing whoever the pick random team, right? I mean, if the LA Clippers were still really bad, I mean, they used to be the butt of all the jokes in the 90s, right? I used to say I'd rather watch the Los Angeles Clippers and the Vancouver Grizzlies play than anything else because I love basketball and NBA basketball that much. But that's not your average fan. So I think it's smart in terms of it's a way to try to expand the audience. But you're right, it could take away from the basketball. And also, and you teased this early on, so we might be getting there, but I also think then there's a risk to the players. There's a fatigue to all of it. There's a fatigue to, like, I'll put it to you this way. Like when I was a kid and I was bullied in like 7th or 8th grade, whatever it was, we all got bullied at some point. Like then I'd go home and it was over. But now, like a kid goes home and they're still bullying you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what I'm saying is, like, as an NBA player, you're always connected. Like, I'd love to see Michael Jordan in the era of social media. Like, I don't know. Maybe he'd still say Republicans. I mean, maybe he'd tweet Republicans buy shoes.
Do you think he would have a Twitter? Do you think Michael Jordan? I guess this is for everybody. Would Michael Jordan have a Twitter? Almost everybody does. Jokic doesn't. Kawhi Leonard doesn't.
I don't think he would.
I think he'd be more Kawhi than LeBron.
I'm not sure, because things become so ubiquitous that yes, there are exceptions, but I see. Okay, this is what I think. I think Jordan would have one of those Twitters that was like run by a handler. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was obvious that Jordan wasn't, but someone
the
from
logos,
Nike
the profile picture, right?
Right.
Yeah.
He'd be that kind of guy. But it's hard. That would be my guess, but it's really hard to say because it's just so different. Like, everyone's always on all the time now, right? You're always connected, and in some ways that can be our greatest strength and resource, but it can also be, it can also be not just something that gets in the way, but it can, I mean, like Kevin Durant. Does that dude look like a happy dude to you? And he's got like 13 burner accounts and like whatever's going on with him. I don't know the guy.
13 might be low.
Right. And it's like
that noise is in his head, right? At a certain point, he seems to be living with this in a way that other people are able to shut out.
And so, like, it has a lot of advantages, but it also looks like it can just cripple the psyches of players as well.
Yeah.
I also think there's, like, I don't know, not every issue needs to be spoken on. There's a racial dynamic here that I certainly can't speak on from any position of authority, but with the Jordan, like, Gant stuff, like, this is pretty black and white, and we're talking, interesting choice of words, but we're talking about who's probably the most famous Black American at the time, right, out there, probably bar none at that point. And so him sort of choosing not to speak on that issue, there are ripple effects throughout a community that I'm probably not the best person to speak on, but this almost goes beyond your traditional, like, should an athlete speak on this? Should a Black athlete speak on this?
Oh yeah,
that's
sure.
a very different question that obviously I can't answer.
Yeah, Bomani was making this point today, and I thought it was great. Like, nobody talks about, why isn't Larry Bird speaking out about opioid addiction in rural Indiana, where it's a huge issue? Like, nobody says Larry Bird needs to answer for problem X that deals with this. So there certainly are those elements to it.
Sure, yeah.
But I kind of do want to move the conversation now to fame, and just, you mentioned Kevin Durant. He's one of many that just seems truly miserable. I think Kyrie Irving seems pretty miserable. There's a lot of athletes, even talking to some of the guys with the Nuggets. I think the Nuggets are out of the limelight enough that they probably want more of the spotlight, not less of it. But I do think there is this, they do seem to hate the idea, and maybe it's because no human on earth can turn off their phone and just be like, that doesn't matter. Even though we all know it doesn't matter, they all just can't help but kind of look and see, what's the comment section saying? What's Twitter saying about my 2 for 16 game tonight? I'll bet you they're roasting me. Is it as simple as that, or are there other things you see in the modern athlete that is driving them to be just sort of tortured?
Well, I think it starts with that, the 24/7 always on thing. I actually met Kevin Durant in Utah, Salt Lake City in 2007. He was a rookie. That was the team with Jeff Green. Westbrook, I don't believe, was on the team yet. And, I spent like 30 to 45 minutes with him during his pregame routine and all that. And I thought to myself, I'm like, this is the nicest kid
Yeah.
you ever want to meet. He had just been in the Garden and scored like 50 points or something in the Garden. And right away, I was like, this kid's the future of the league. And then I remember going back to the hotel and thinking, God, he's a sensitive dude. They're going to ruin him. Like, and social media didn't really exist yet. But I just remember thinking, like, and I mean this sincerely, I was like, that's a sweet human being. Like, he's a sweet guy. Like, I really liked him. And a lot of, you meet dudes when they're rookies and they tend to be sweeter. The game makes people more cynical. Well, not
it is
the
true.
Game, not the game of basketball, but the game, right?
Yeah,
the NBA makes people more cynical. But there was something with him. There was a sensitivity that I loved, but I had this sense like, man, this is going to break him. Now, at that point, Twitter, I don't know if I didn't have Twitter. Maybe it existed. I didn't have it. And it wasn't like it is now at all. I mean, the president of the United States wasn't tweeting on Twitter, right? Like, so it was just a different time. So I couldn't have foreseen that. But there was there's a personality type is what I'm saying that I think is more likely to be tortured by this. And there are other personality types that I think, like Kobe Bryant dabbled in Twitter, right? But I think if he came up in the zenith of Twitter, I mean, I think he would have scrolled to find those comments that
totally
were saying he's horrible, and it would have made him a better basketball player, So
Kobe arrived at Twitter at the right moment in his personal life because he did use it very smartly, like just to kind of put things out and then walk away. But it was never controversial. It was always from the book, from the Church of Kobe, basically the little scriptures from the Church of Kobe, and then I'm out.
Right. And so, I think personality has a lot to do with this. Personality's always had a lot to do with how people respond to fame. But like what fame was in, I don't know, 1995 or even 2005 is not the same as it is in 2020. It's just not. It's different.
Yeah. I tend to agree with a lot of that. Oh, we have somebody hopping in here. It's our buddy Cade. Cade, what's happening, brother?
Not too much. How are you guys?
What's up, Cade?
We're good. You're a young lad. You've grown up in the social media era, so you kind of don't know anything else. I mean, I could ask you this, Cade, but like, when did you first get your own social media accounts? Do you remember how old you were?
Yeah. Let's see here. So the first social media I had was Instagram. I had that when I was 12, but I didn't really use it too much. I wasn't as active on social media until probably freshman year of high school.
Okay. That's still really young. Freshman year of high school. You're just I'm sounding like an old man here, but like you're so
like an old man.
You don't think though at freshman year of high school you're just like,
no, you can have a job. You're like out on your own. Like you're talking with your friends more than you are your parents at that point.
I think that's I'm not saying it's too young. Like I'm sure my kids will end up having a TikTok in like 3 or 4 years or so. I have no idea.
They have
whatever the
right
next
now.
thing. Yeah, they probably do. They actually are. It's scary to watch my 5-year-old navigate her phone or the iPad or something. I'm like, wow, you're really good at. You can't read, but you can like navigate YouTube really well. It's incredible. No, I just that is really weird. The next generation. I wonder if they're more prepared or less prepared for the social media world. Oh, good question. So, really spurred a lot of
jump in at the same time. Who are you asking?
I was just saying that as a general statement. No.
I don't know. I'd say they're more prepared because they'd have to grow up dealing with it. So it'd be more of like have already pre-adapted to it instead of having it be something that's introduced to them and having to adjust to it later.
Yeah, maybe. I do wonder if there's something, again, I'm sounding like such an old man on this, but I do wonder if there's something like we've read all the reports about people on Instagram. You only share the best parts of your life. So everybody sees everybody else's best part. And you're like, well, why is my life not as great as everyone else's appears to be? So I don't know. Maybe there's some of these things built in.
Well, Adam, my take on this, that we are the most tortured generation. All the people that are at this first part of the internet where the rules in which all these human beings that were allowed to sort of grow on their own, create their own cultures, create their own ideas, create their own norms, were able to just be alone. And now they're all being forced to come together, and we don't know what we all think about anything. And so it is our unfortunate job to go online and sort of have these battles back and forth to sort of find where the middle ground is on absolutely everything. So somebody like Cade or somebody like your daughters are coming in, and they're going to be benefiting from the battles that we have fought, where we find out like, oh, there are certain things you cannot say.
Yeah, but that presupposes that the next generation has gotten in front of it somehow.
Yeah,
this thing is always going to continue
it's starting
to
from the
evolve.
idea that like they know, like they're already so much more conscious of what other people think in a way that we could not have been, because we had no way to know what people that we never had contact with were thinking.
Sure.
And now you know what every human being on Earth thinks about every single topic, right? And so you can sort of figure out like what is the right path for humanity as a whole to take. But we're unfortunately the lab rats, and for us,
It's going down a dark
we are getting
road.
tortured.
It's getting worse and worse. I think we know that.
Well, you know what? We can dive right into the internet and all the best it has with a segment we call Online with Eli.
Wow.
we can
A hard left turn.
You know what? The internet is terrible, but let's go and see what's out there.
Wow. I certainly wasn't ready for that.
Yeah,
but,
so Travis, this is a segment where Eric has curated a list of the most important things to happen on the internet. It's most important, right? That's the criteria.
I think that these entries will speak for themselves. I think it's pretty obvious where they rank in the news of the day and just the news overall for humans. So, welcome to Online with D-Line. So, the first entry we have here, let's take a look here. So,
that's your email.
Wow, there you go. Okay, I was hoping you'd really go to like click on the wrong thing. Oh my goodness, look at this guy.
Can we just appreciate
incredible?
Just let's look at this. I just want to watch. I've been watching this for every minute since this GIF came out, and I don't know if I'll ever stop. Look at this man.
You know, this was a fixture in Michael Jordan's life.
Yes, it's unbelievable. So, if we wanted to break down like the most impressive parts of this, number one, I think, is his hair.
Yeah, for sure.
He definitely looks like a judge in England. Like
I think I watched him in Tiger King the other night.
I think he looks exactly like Steven Pinker. I know this is a weird person to throw out, but to me, that's who he looks like. I also just love, like, he is the least charismatic person on earth, and he is shit talking Michael Jordan. It's so great, and Michael Jordan has to sit there and take it.
What is he
He's just
do?
like, this little dude right here just took my money in a made-up gambling game.
He wanted to bully him out of it so bad, but the cameras were rolling, people were watching. The way he just had to take a seat.
I also love how much. Yeah, Michael can't say anything. You see him; he's just sitting there like,
it's killing him.
Yeah, Michael's so pissed. He's like, God damn it, I'm going to go drop 50 now.
Yeah. So here are the other top elements of this that I don't know if you've considered is the size of this man's jacket.
That's just the 90s, man.
That was the style. Yeah.
That's the 90s.
But him especially. And so how old do we think this guy is, by the way?
In this photo?
Yeah.
40?
You can never tell in the 80s how old somebody
That's so true.
is.
That's actually a really good point.
I'm going 40.
The further you go back, everybody just looks like your parents, so that you're just like, oh, they're old.
Very confused. All right, so this guy, the obvious standout star of The Last Dance.
For sure.
I know I said this on yesterday's show, but I just think it's so hilarious that Michael Jordan had his own office inside the Bulls locker room to gamble.
Actually, Travis, you were around back in like the mellow eras.
Like,
Did anybody have like their special own private office or special part that they were allowed to go into?
No, I mean, like Melo had 3 lockers and Iverson had 3
Three?
lockers.
3?
Yeah, and then like Johan Petro had like half a locker, because other guys had to sort of give up some real estate, but no. And then I remember there was like I don't know if I haven't been in Pepsi Center, in the bowels of Pepsi Center for a minute, but there was like a game room too. Where,
they still got those.
You could shoot pool and all that. And when Iverson got there, it was like, Bubba Chuck kind of ran the show, man. Like he determined who got to go in there, when they got to go in there. So
like a bouncer.
You might and he would like yell at people to get out. You had to have like enough status to get in, and so maybe that was like his office. The little billiards room there.
Is it Richard Jefferson that was telling the story about how they had to put the rule in about because there was the family room. And at the beginning of the year, you could only pick one spouse or girlfriend to go because they were having an issue where players had like multiple girlfriends on the list. It made for an awkward family room.
Oh yes,
not necessarily a Nugget story. I think that was like a net story or something, but it still cracked. I was like, you don't think about that, but yeah, I guess.
Incredible.
All right,
that GIF was making me dizzy, guys.
I had to stop it. Listen,
Spinning
although
memes.
if you guys weren't here, I would still be watching it.
I believe that. Actually.
What else you got?
Let's find out. What else do I have?
This was uncomfortable. This one was uncomfortable.
So
this is
is
actually
from
incredible.
The Star Telegram from Saturday, March 26th of 2005, talking about how charismatic and how enjoyable Dwayne Wade was.
And still is.
But so if we go in and we see this little excerpt here, it says, when Wade's wife showed up last month at an All-Star Game event in Denver without her significant other, actress Gabrielle Union told her, you tell your husband I'm a big fan of his.
That's so crazy. People don't know. Dwayne Wade ended up divorcing his wife eventually, then marrying Gabrielle Union. So this is a very weird. Somebody found this in like an old archive and was like, "Wow, that's a weird detail."
Well, it's good to know it was all premeditated. That's good.
That's really
to have that information on.
You know what I just thought about? We did not hear about Michael Jordan's wife or kids once in this documentary. Not once.
Yeah.
Well, like, I know they're trying to cover 20 different storylines, but
again, I think an athlete has the right to not. Like, my kids, some athletes like to bring their kids out and like, Chris Paul does this with his. Some people are like, hey, I don't want my family. That's
I just thought they would come up in a video or come up in some soundbite like once or on camera once.
I agree. I had the same thought, and of course it's a documentary, so it's edited how it's edited, right? Yeah. And we can't think that this is the actual story of people's existence, but it lent some credence to this idea that I have. And full disclosure, I've met Michael Jordan twice, like not really met him, like sitting at a draft combine, like doing the what's up?
Yeah. Did he give you the one up? Did he give you the nod?
I got the Well,
you got it.
I was in the little executive.
I can't believe I've met Michael
Jordan.
Jordan.
Everybody gets that's I know Jordan because he gave me one of those once, but so I don't know him at all, is what I'm saying. But my sense of him is that he's a pretty tortured person in a lot of ways. Like he was an incredible basketball player. Maybe the most. I mean, people talk about Babe Ruth or whatever. I mean, I wasn't alive in that era, but I think that he might be the most famous athlete in the history of sport. And like, God, can you imagine being that big? But like some of those same qualities that help you reach that level, I think could really wreak some havoc on your relationships and your personal life. Now, all of us, our personal lives are complicated and challenging. And so don't get me wrong, but could you literally you're the most famous athlete in the world, maybe the most famous person in the world. And to get to that level, the type of like cutthroat competitiveness and almost like competitive pettiness that you have to reach that level. Can you imagine being married to that person or having that person be your father? So like we glorify it in a sports sense, but like the dude doesn't strike me as a very happy dude. Like it's from a basketball perspective, we watch him, MF and Isaiah Thomas and all this stuff, and we watch it. We're like, oh, that's great or whatever. But like as a human being in the world, like that's not so great that he has that reaction 2 decades or whatever the hell it is later now, right? 3 decades almost.
Yeah, he was definitely Michael Jordan was meant to be like a great warrior and like was meant to like die on the battlefield.
Right. But he's still living.
We moved past warring as a culture. So like now
he's so tuned to be a basketball player. Yeah, to be a competitor. And
like the prophecy never came about and his body's still here and he doesn't know what to do with it either. He's just walking around.
It is kind of dark, but it is sort of how I feel about it. I mean, like he does seem like a guy, we've talked about it, but just a guy without a
it'd be like walking around like hanging out with the guy from the 300, right? Like after the battle's over and he's just like he can't calm down. All right,
what
back
else
to online with D-Line. All right, so
is that it?
No. So Let's see.
Enough of this Gabrielle Union one. Let's
All right.
move it along.
I can't get enough of that one.
What's going on? All right.
It's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable.
It is. All right. Well, hold on. Let me.
Wow, online with D-line. What a letdown. Wow.
Well, hold on.
You know what's funny? I used to run this segment for several weeks. Two episodes ago, I handed it off to him. We had the terrible. Just gonna berate. Should I have some like? Oh wait, hold on. I got the music for it. Hold on.
Well, I don't know what happened when I usually have them in order. All right, let's talk about murder hornets, shall we?
Okay, sure. Why not? Murder hornets. Oh God, I don't think I've ever seen one.
Those
are huge.
That's gotta be Photoshop.
That's gotta be fake. How big is that?
Or it's gotta
hand?
be like the smallest hand ever. Yeah.
Like, that's Kawhi Leonard's
Or the
hand.
big.
Oh my God.
That guy from the Burger King commercials.
Yeah. So, Dr. Travis Heath, I know that you grew up, as we all grew up, fearing for your life from Africanized killer bees, right?
Do you remember that? Do you remember that, Travis?
Oh yeah,
I remember it too.
Yep.
Are we? I mean, is this a sign of the apocalypse, or is this another Africanized killer bees, where it's a much ado about nothing, the murder hornets?
Probably much ado about nothing, but when you see that picture, it doesn't feel that way. I saw a video, man, and it was incredible. It was like one of these nature show videos about 90 seconds long. It was on Twitter. If I knew this was going to be a segment, I would have brought it to the party here. But
if I knew it was going to be a segment,
it showed how honeybees, I think they were honeybees, kill one of these. So one of these murder hornets like got up in their, their nest or whatever you call it, and it grabbed one of the bees and it starts suffocating. And then all the bees jump on top of the murder hornet. And then what they said is, in 2 minutes or less, it raises the temperature of the murder hornet such that it burns it alive. And I was like, wow, this is like the most incredible like communal act to be able to kill this
metal.
So you know what, man, D-line, I was afraid of these things until I saw that, and then I was just like, oh, like we're good, man. Like we just got to get enough like honeybees, and they'll burn all these.
Well, but here's the issue. Is I've seen this clip that you're referencing.
Yeah,
and the problem is that they're Japanese honeybees, and Japanese honeybees have been living alongside these murder hornets, which, by the way, they don't call murder hornets in Japan. This is clearly a spin job done by some sort of branding department. Yeah, calling murder hornets.
Here. Yeah.
we were joking about like you can just affix murder in front of any animal. It sounds like the most terrifying goddamn animal.
Murder llamas.
Bee shortage? Aren't we like missing the bee? Can't we not find the bees?
Yeah, that's the problem. Like, our bees don't know how to fight these murder hornets, but the Japanese bees know how to fight murder hornets. So we need to bring the Japanese bees. I
was not afraid of this story one bit until you showed me this picture. So is there anything else for Online with D-Line?
There's two more, but you know what? I'll save it for next time. This has been Online with D-Line.
A rousing success.
Yeah. I'm carrying the Spanish jacket around now.
Hey, Cade. Oh, hey, God, Cade's here.
Hey.
One thing for you again, Cade, before we'll move on and get to the steps. I see I have a new participant for the steps in the queue, so we'll get to that here. But
love you, Cade.
Well, I've got a question really for everybody here. The Nuggets, man, we've been thinking a lot about the Nuggets and what maybe they're lacking or this or that. The Nuggets clearly do not have a Michael Jordan. Very few teams do. But what I mean by that is they don't have the player that is the asshole, right? They're just the killer. Right. And one of the big questions I think that naturally arises from watching this and arises from the Church of Kobe Bryant, who's really spread the Mamba mentality, is do you have to be that way to be great? Or do you have to be at least a little bit that way? Like, do all the greats have a little bit of that in them to some degree? I'm really curious what you think about this, Travis.
You don't have to be exactly like Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant. I think there are a lot of like Mamba mentality is fine. It's not the mentality for everyone. I truly believe that. There's lots of different ways to find success, not just at basketball, but in life, whatever you're doing. I do think, though, what you have to have is you have to have something that kicks you up to another gear, right? Like the great ones can reach another gear, and people get there different ways. Like, I'm not saying Nick Van Exel was a great player, but he's a great example of how, like, when you made Nick Van Exel mad, he played better, right? He could reach another gear. Now, he couldn't reach a superstar level gear, but he could reach like a pretty damn good player gear, right? But if you are going to be a truly superstar level, Hall of Fame level player, I think in any sport, but I don't know this to be true in basketball, but it's my strong suspicion that you have to be able to do that. Now, how does that happen? Like Jokic, the best player on the Nuggets, can he take it to another gear? He's shown early signs of that. Like if you look at that when he played 58 minutes or whatever the heck that was in the playoff series last year, like that's kind of taking it to another gear, right? So you see pieces of that, but it doesn't all have to be this Mamba mentality, like cutthroat. I mean, we have Hall of Fame players that we've seen that have won multiple championships that aren't necessarily that way, right? Other great players, and think about not just in basketball, across all sports. So if I'm running a team, the thing is that you have to discover what the personalities are of your best players, and then you have to build around them. And I don't just mean a system in terms of X's and O's, but a motivational system, a support system that helps that player reach that. Like one of my biggest pet peeves is when we say like, oh, player like Kwame Brown was a bust, or he's one of the all-timers, right? But my thought's always like, what? Like, was he a bust, or like, did he just go into a horrible situation for him, right? It's probably a combination, but like in order, like Jordan, do you think we could debate this for the next 3 days, but like, does Jordan become Jordan like we know him if Phil Jackson isn't the coach? Like,
that's a great question.
I don't know.
Yeah,
like I don't know. And he's still obviously he's great, but what I'm saying is there's all these different events that happen around us in our lives that, and some of them are fortuitous, some of them are just dumb luck, some of them are we work really hard. There's a lot of different factors, but like, we just take it for granted, like Jordan's the best, he won these 6 titles, never lost the finals, But is he? Like, what if they don't draft Scottie Pippen? Now, I think they'd find another Robin. But do you find another Phil Jackson that gets him to buy into that offense? Or does he win it the Doug Collins way, trying to score 50 points a game? Like, I don't know.
I go back even further, and I think a lot of times, obviously with LeBron, those LeBron teams early on weren't great, in my opinion. There were some high-profile losses, and I always wonder, like, would an earlier of success maybe propelled LeBron and gained his confidence at a moment rather than crashed? I mean, I think we can all agree his confidence sort of crashed in 2010 and 11, and it sort of at the midpoint, what we consider the midpoint of his career. If instead of crashing, if it would have surged, does he become an even greater player early on? Because in my opinion, after LeBron won a title, he just started getting better and better and better every year. And it was like the monkey was off his back and this like extreme growth could sort of happen. And I wonder about that with a lot of players. Michael had the shot at UNC, his freshman season. And I wonder if it was like, okay, take that away. Is there a confidence break there? Is there something that happens there? And I don't know. I think, so I'm with you on this like sort of ripple effect. And sometimes you don't know where some of the things that have become virtuous for you might have been started as vices, but they were allowed to sort of grow because of circumstance in the right direction. Cade, you follow a lot of other sports, and I'm going to ask you specifically about baseball because I know what people idolize in football. It's the same stuff, the toughness, the like killer, whatever. But in baseball, are the best baseball players talked about the same way of like you have to have that Mamba mentality to be great?
No, I mean the greatest baseball player on earth right now is Mike Trout, and he not even close, honestly. He's kind of like a robot. I mean, the dude just goes out there and is the best player on the field every single day. But then when you look at something like pitching, right? That's more of an aspect of baseball where you do value the mental side of it.
Yeah.
Baseball, Yogi Berra once said baseball is 90% mental and the other half is physical.
Yeah.
And I think pitching is one of the more prominent areas where that shows up. Like Greg Maddux was one of the most mentally dominating pitchers ever, and he was also one of the most dominant pitchers ever. Randy Johnson, Pedro Martinez, these guys were very tough mentally, and they demonstrated it, and they showed success. So I think it might show up in more areas of baseball than it does. Like I think pitching, it shows up more, and hitting not necessarily.
No,
I also
hitting
think
you like almost turn your brain off. Like you're just in reaction mode, right? And pitching, you like have to be deliberate.
Kawhi Leonard would be a great baseball.
It is a
I also
different
think
sport.
there's a misunderstanding of what this mentality is too. It's like maybe the most important part is that ruthless obsession with winning as it manifests with your attention to detail and your routine day to day. Like Mike Trout might very well be a Kobe Bryant in his efforts to get better at baseball every day. But he's not a Kobe Bryant in that he wants to murder the people he shares the field with, right? So
well, someone is that way is someone who we're very familiar with, in Nolan Arenado.
Yeah,
that man holds his teammates accountable just like Mike and Kobe do. He has that same mentality. I mean, they talk about Michael Jordan holding his teammates accountable in The Last Dance, and I'm like, man, this sounds like Nolan, because he has that mentality and he wants to win, which is part of the reason he might want out.
Quiet you.
And I mean, even back a little bit further, like Todd Helton had that same mentality of wanting to get better every day. They asked him, like, so when did you feel comfortable with your swing? And he said, I've never felt comfortable with my swing for more than 2 weeks. So it's
wow.
Yeah,
that's so crazy. Baseball does seem it seems a lot more mental than what I would have thought, a handful of years ago. Before I let you go, I got this. I really, John Presley, really appreciate you being in here, but I love this question because it's like I think you're at the wrong place. I think you made the wrong phone call.
But let's figure it out. Let's
figure it out.
Answer the question,
schedule coming out on Thursday. What would be the first four you'd like the Broncos to start out with Week 5 in the bye? I actually don't even know how to answer this question, so I'm not going to pretend to.
What do you want? Do you want a bad team out of the gate? Like probably
the Raiders Week 1.
Oh yeah, you want to? Yeah, you.
I can't even wrap my head around the NBA returning, so I'm definitely not going to wrap my head around the NFL returning. Kate, thanks so much for hopping on, man. Always enjoyed when you join the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
All right, are you guys ready for the game that is sweeping America?
Unbelievable. It's online with D-Line the game.
Not online with, but we do have Luke M. Luke M, you are on, but you're muted. You are self-muted, and you're also not in the frame.
A legendary entrance.
A legendary.
All right.
Look at this shirt.
Look at this shirt.
I'm fine.
Look at that.
Ready.
Philip Lindsay. You went to my high school.
Baby.
Philip Lindsay did. I think you went to his high school.
Yeah, absolutely true.
Well, Luke M, are you familiar with how the steps work?
No.
Okay, it's gonna be it's gonna be a tough start for you. You are hopping in for the first time on our own game show here, where you have to answer Denver Nuggets trivia, and if you answer 5 right, you win a free sticker pack, which you could gamble to win 5, get 5 more right. You win a free T-shirt. You could gamble that, win 5 more, and get a lifetime subscription to DNVR. And as a special added bonus, you get Travis Heath here, the Dr. Travis Heath. Doctor. I think our first ever doctor to participate in the steps.
100%, without question.
He's a guarantee to know all 15 questions. There's no question about it.
We didn't study Denver Nuggets in my PhD.
You didn't?
Oh, you're screwed, Luke. You're screwed.
It's all self-study for me.
I've got it all for myself.
Luke's confident. I love. They're always confident.
Honestly, Luke, you just have to clear question 2. That's the bar for worst performance. So
that is true. Question number 1. Oh, this one is kind of hard.
Oh God.
Who currently wears number 4 for the Denver Nuggets?
Paul Millsap.
That is correct.
That was not
difficult
hard.
for some.
Well, it's difficult for some. It's
Phil.
difficult for number 1. Where was Michael Malone a head coach before he became a head coach of the Denver Nuggets?
The Sacramento Kings.
Oh man, Luke is. Look how calm. He's not even asking.
And he's through. He's through 2.
He's through 2, so he's not going to be the worst. Number 3, where did Will Barton attend college?
Memphis.
Man,
Luke Evans not messing around.
He is not messing around at all. Number 4. Wait, did you add that question number 4? Harrison, did you hop in here and steal and change question number 4?
I don't think so.
It's really hard. I'm skipping it. Number 4. Mason Plumlee has 2 brothers who either play or played in the NBA. What are their names?
Marshall and Miles.
Wow, he got Marshall first.
They all played at Duke.
Oh yeah, I did put in question number 4. I didn't think it was that hard.
All right, well, it's going to become question number 5. Who did Nikola Jokic set his regular season career high in points against? This one courtesy of Harrison. Regular season.
The Hawks.
Wow!
Thank you, Luke. Thank you.
Cool.
All
Man.
right.
I knew we were going to get a good participant on today's show. I knew it.
Sticky hand
You know
Luke.
all of those.
47 points, if that's any bonus.
My goodness. This
Wow.
guy-
Well, actually, no, I was kind of arrogant.
He's a little
but-
flexing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Guys,
We're
I'm,
gonna dock a sticker pack.
I'm feeling really good about Luke's chances to go all the way. He's
Yeah, I'm going to keep going.
Good call.
didn't even have to
Oh,
ask.
Luke.
Travis,
it.
did you know the answer to all these?
No, all of them until the last one.
Yeah,
I wouldn't
that-
have remembered the
Yeah,
Hawks. I sure as hell wouldn't have
thought
remembered
Brooklyn.
47 points either.
Yeah, that's impressive stuff. All right, number 6. Which player led the Nuggets in offensive rebounds per game this season?
I'm going to go Mason.
Oh,
no.
The key to the question was per game. Per game. It's of course Jokic. He gets the most rebounds. He plays the most minutes. Wow.
Guys, guys.
These questions where it
I
seems
loved how
like
quickly
He
Luke
didn't even-
was answering
He
those.
didn't even
man.
ask
Boom,
Travis.
boom,
You guys could have
boom.
worked it out together and talked about like, okay, maybe this, maybe that.
Yeah, I
you
would've-
live by the
I
sword, you
would've-
die by the sword. You know.
That one, but I admire his confidence. Also, damn, when you miss, you're gone quick. Like,
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God.
Don't say
Why?
anything dumb, Travis. We'll kick you out in a second.
Okay. Jeez, Louise. You don't mess around here.
Mm-mm.
Oh
No,
my
no.
God, the steps are hilarious. I can't believe he was so confident for 5 and then immediately just out. Didn't even
I still, I'm rooting for Luke M in anything he does in life.
yeah.
Luke M, if you want to
Hold
start
on,
a small business,
hold on.
hit me up.
Luke M, as in Chris M's child, the
Oh, yeah,
son of Chris
that's what
Morley.
it was.
Was it?
Yeah, that's right.
Oh,
He told
wow.
us he was going to play today.
Dude,
well,
Hall of Fame DNVR members.
Hall of Fame, first balloter. Yeah. All right. Well, guys, thanks so much for tuning in and hanging with us. Dr. Travis Heath, always enjoy having you
Good
on.
to
And
meet you, man. Yeah.
I know this show's a little weird. It's a little different, but appreciate you being game for it.
Yeah, well, weird's my thing, man. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
You are first team all weird in a good way. Everybody else, thanks so much for hanging with us. And then, of course, we're going to be back tomorrow. Fast break breakfast. My guy Keith Parrish is joining us. Very funny guy. I'm sure he's going to have some takes about the best young cores in the NBA. Can't wait for that one. Everybody else.